We begin with this Fox News alert. President Trump right now in the Situation Room, where he says he is making a final determination on a tentative peace deal with Iran. It was reached yesterday in part. The president laid out his demands on Truth Social about an hour ago. Iran will complete the immediate removal and/or detonation of any mines that are left, which will not be many. Ships caught in the strait due to our amazing and unprecedented naval blockade, which will now be lifted, may start the process of heading home. Say hello to their wives, husbands, parents, and families from me, from your favorite president. It was much longer than that. We truncated it a bit to bring you some highlights, but there's so much more to get to from what he told us not long ago. You're watching Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-host Kayleigh McEnany, and we welcome today Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, Rebecca Heinrich, Hudson Institute Senior Fellow, and David Webb, Fox News contributor and host of the David Webb Show on SiriusXM Patriot. So this is a moment that we knew or hoped or prayed would come, and that is that we are at the precipice. Choose peace or something else. It's no more bluster. It's no more talk, at least not from our end. I don't know. Iran still isn't clear on who runs the country.
And I think that's the issue. When you look at it at one and you go back to their mosaic strategy, which is a dispersed leadership, who are you really dealing with? And then the second part, even if you're talking to the right parties, who can uphold the terms of the deal? And that's a strategy for Iran. It's a strategy that's effective because you're never really dealing with one, and there can be an excuse of, well, I didn't do that if they carry out something. What hasn't been addressed here a lot in this discussion, and I certainly believe the White House has done it, is the potential issue of nuclear proliferation. Not just the information as we saw out of an AQ Khan in the 1990s, but of the material that they had. While we've accounted for a lot of it, has some been proliferated? There's been transit, overland transit, interactions with China, with North Korea. There's a lot of concerns there, and we're seeing their proxies, and we don't know how many are out there, whether inspired or otherwise. For instance, we had a knife attack in Amsterdam just a couple of days ago. Someone yelling Allahu Akbar. Was that related to someone else or related to Iran? There's a lot going on here that we need to admit that we won't be able to control. So you do the best you can to impose costs on them, as the president has done, and hope that the strategy of continued checks and balances against them, a sliding scale. If you do something good, you get something. Really, it's about the people, not the leadership.
That's interesting.
And also to look at our partners, Oman, UAE, they share a border, they share a sea component to this with their international waters. That's an offset against Iran's waters on their side of the Strait of Hormuz. So all of these things are in play, and don't trust, because they will delay, they will lie. They have done this for 47 years, and it's also a strategy that's used by radical Islamists.
Rebecca, just furthering that part, I want to get to the post that the president put out not too long ago. He said the enriched material, sometimes referred to as nuclear dust, which is buried deep underground with virtually collapsed mountains on top of it, because of our powerful B-2 bomber attack 11 months ago, will be unearthed by the U.S. in close coordination and conjunction with the Islamic Republic of Iran, plus the International Atomic Energy Agency, destroyed. So that agency presence that David was talking about, that's part of what's being talked about. And David's right, we haven't really heard much about that in detail.
No, and this is something that the president has been very consistent on throughout the war, is that for him, it is of primary importance that the United States dismantle and remove the nuclear material. So I agree with the president's assessment that it's entombed right now. I mean, Midnight Hammer, Epic Fury has already significantly degraded the nuclear program, which is why I reject this notion that any deal, even a deal that I'm not happy with, on the nuclear program, any deal is still going to be way better than the Obama deal, because we're starting from a totally different baseline, which is their nuclear program, and the weaponization aspect of it has been destroyed. But I do think that we need to keep in mind that the Iran regime, these leaders, cannot be trusted, which is why I think President Trump has been very clear also, and I spoke with a senior White House official about this last week, that we're not going to remove anything in the region without demonstrated Iranian behavior. No element of the blockade, no sanctions relief. We're not going to remove U.S. forces from the region. So we're not trusting the Iranians. We're going to have to actually see if they permit ships to go through freely through the Strait of Hormuz. There's still over 1,000 ships trapped because the Iranians continue to lay mines. We just caught Iranian IRGC militia laying mines just a couple of days ago.
Right. And to that point, that's when the president was saying that ships caught in the strait due to our amazing and unprecedented naval blockade will now be lifted, which will now be lifted, may start the process of heading home. You're absolutely right. You have thousands of people on those ships. If you add up everybody who's in the Strait of Hormuz over the last few weeks, you know, Kayleigh, there was another part that kind of jumped out at me at this post, and that's about the money. No money will be exchanged until further notice. I talked with the Vice Admiral of CENTCOM last hour, former Vice Admiral of CENTCOM, Fawzi Miller, and he was saying that, you know, this is significant because of how much their economy is hurting. And so you do kind of keep this as a guardrail around them. I'm paraphrasing him a bit.
Yeah, that's right. No dust, no deal. Also, no dust, no dollars. You're not going to see pallets of cash on a plane loaded over to Iran in exchange. Of course, I'm talking about the Obama deal in 2015, in exchange for a deal that had sunset clauses. How do you have a deal to stop nuclear weapons for 10 to 15 years? Oh, that may keep some of us safe who are in our mid-70s, but what about our kids? 10 to 15 years, you can get a nuclear weapon, a maniacal regime. It is nuts. The Obama deal didn't have anywhere, any place inspections. So how do you even keep a check on a regime you don't trust if you can't inspect them? Ultimately, what this comes down to is trust. Do you trust the Trump administration? And my emphatic answer to that is yes. And here is why. Number one, President Trump has repeatedly shown he is not afraid to walk away from a deal. He has walked away from a deal time and time again if it is a bad deal. Number two, he has shown he is not afraid to use military action. Fordo was hit. That took a lot of courage. The Ayatollah is dead. That took a lot of courage. Soleimani is gone. That took a lot of courage. He uses military action strategically, and he is not afraid, I believe, to resume this if need be. Fordo, Isfahan, Natanz, all of these nuclear facilities all were hit by President Trump, and that is the key difference in why he will be able to make a deal, I believe, that Barack Obama was not.
I mentioned the retired Vice Admiral John Fawzi Miller. Let's watch a little bit of that interview with me from last hour.
The Iranian regime has a history, as they get close to a negotiated deal, of behaving in a more belligerent fashion. And we're seeing that right now in the Strait. They've conducted some attacks against shipping. They've conducted some attacks allegedly against U.S. Naval warships. And we've responded to most of those. Even though it may be negotiated, we're going to have to continue to be prepared to use force to keep the negotiation on track and to keep the deal in place.
And what he told me was that that period of time is undetermined, how long we'd need to be able to do that. Lisa.
So he's actually my friend's dad, which is very helpful.
I love
Which
that.
is very helpful when you're navigating through all of this, Iran stuff. He's a great man, a patriot and a hero as well. And President Trump has demonstrated he's willing to use force, obviously. And also, I think that one of the most important things is President Trump cares about his legacy. And the White House has repeatedly said, we're not going to have a weak deal like the JCPOA. So I think that's very important for him as we enter into these negotiations and we're looking for a final deal. I also think he's willing to take the political hits as well, clearly going to war in a midterm election cycle, which a lot of presidents probably wouldn't want to do. I think he's up against a wall a little bit, as David pointed out, and I've been pointing out on this show and others for a long time now. The Iranian regime is built to last. You've got the Mosaic defense structure with the IRGC commanders throughout the country. They're sort of built for resilience in these sort of scenarios. You're also up against a country that has over 90 million people and is 4 times the size of Iraq. So regime change is not really part of the equation. He doesn't want to be stuck there forever, President Trump. And then you look at the fact that a lot of damage has already been done. I mean, with the CENTCOM commander, Admiral Cooper, briefed Congress, the Senate, a couple of weeks ago, mentioning the fact that the Allied operations have damaged or destroyed over 85% of Iran's ballistic missile, drones, and naval defense industrial base, also damaging their ability to produce weapons, which is crucial. And then the last thing I'll point out is even prior to the war, we saw inflation in Iran over 40%. The economy was a driving force of frustration from Iranians. Now they've sustained, I think something like $270 billion worth of damage and growing. They've poured resources into building out their missiles, their drones, et cetera. That's all been damaged as well. So that economy is now significantly worse. So Iran is now in a much worse scenario than they were prior to the war. But yeah, you know, there's a lot of things that he's got to consider. Like, we're not going to get regime change, so how long do you stay there?
Well, we don't know if we got regime change. We don't know who the heck is running.
Actually, that's a really good point, Harris. You're right.
We haven't seen him come out. Do you know how old that statement was? By the way, today is the 91st day of the war, and we have been in the ceasefire for 52 of it. So the president is keeping a couple of promises that he made. He does prefer peace. If he didn't, he wouldn't be this patient.
Yeah, it's like, who are we even negotiating with?
Right.
The other thing, too,
we don't know.
the regime
well, and the
is so
president as well of Iran, and who another military expert told me this week, he doesn't actually trust him. Victoria Coates has said that. From the Heritage Foundation has said, yeah, you know, you can trust but verify, but it's going to be hard with these guys.
Yeah.
Well, there's another component here, which is look at the perspective of your enemy. What are they willing to bear? How much cost are they willing to impose on their own people? You're not dealing with a traditional land war political ideology, political enemy, as we have in past conflicts. We're dealing with an ideology that sees death as a part of the equation and destruction of their own society. So you've got to recognize the enemy for what they are. And this president and the deployment of the DIME strategy, the instruments of national power, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, that's a big part of this. Look at your enemy and deal with who you're really facing, not someone else.
And we have an asset on the ground. It may not be armed, but there are beautiful Persian people on the ground. I mean, that country is a gorgeous country. And if they can come back and flourish, imagine the potential there. And they're all partners in this. Those who don't want to follow the radical Islamic regime that's outgoing, potentially. Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.